Hello and welcome. I'm Yuki. There's a quiet idea I grew up with in Japan, and it's this: living well and spending a lot are not the same thing. In fact, they often have very little to do with each other. Money here tends to be handled calmly and carefully without much fuss. People save a good deal, and yet daily life doesn't feel poor or pinched or like a constant going without. It feels mostly like enough. Today, I'd like to share the everyday habits behind that, not tips for getting rich, and certainly not advice about what to do with your money. I'm no expert, and that isn't what this is. Just the ordinary ways of spending less and wasting less that seem to go along with a settled, contented life here. And as always, none of it is about Japanese people being better with money than anyone else. These are simply old, everyday habits, and any one of them can be borrowed. Let's begin. The first one is the oldest and maybe my favorite. It's a little household notebook called a Kakeibo. For more than 100 years now, people here, often the women of the house, have kept one, writing down by hand what comes in and what goes out. It isn't a complicated thing at all. At the start of the month, you note what you have and what you'd like to set aside. Then, through the month, you simply write down what you spend in pen, in a book. That's really the whole of it. But something happens when you write a purchase down by hand instead of just tapping a card and forgetting it a moment later. You notice it, you feel it, just a little. And that small act of noticing, repeated day after day, does more to change how a person spends than any strict budget ever could. My mother kept hers at the kitchen table and updated it while the rice cooked. It was never a stressful thing or a scolding. It was just paying quiet attention to where the money actually went. At the end of each month, there's a small, calm reckoning, a look back at what came in, what went out, and where it quietly slipped away. Not to feel guilty about any of it, but simply to see it clearly. Most overspending, I've come to think, isn't reckless at all. It's just unseen. The little notebook makes it seen, and seeing, it turns out, is most of the cure. Underneath the Kakeibo is an older feeling still, one that every Japanese child grows up hearing. Mottainai. It's the small pang you feel when something good is wasted. Food left on a plate, a thing thrown out that still had use in it, a tap left running for no reason. Mottainai is the quiet voice that says, don't waste this. And it shapes money without ever feeling like restraint, because it isn't really about money at all. It's about respect for the thing itself, for the work that made it, for what you already have in your hands. When you genuinely dislike waste, you spend less almost by accident. You finish what you bought. You use things all the way up. You think twice before replacing something that still works perfectly well. It's far less a budgeting rule than it is a way of seeing the world, and it's one of the gentlest ways there is. Nobody has to force it. It just becomes how you are. That way of seeing shows up clearly in how people choose to buy. The habit here leans toward buying less, but choosing better. One good knife, kept sharp for 30 years, rather than a drawer full of cheap ones. A single well-made coat, worn for a decade, instead of a new one every season. It sounds at first like the more expensive path. Over a whole life, it's usually the very opposite. A thing that's well-made and well looked after rarely needs replacing. And you stop buying the endless stream of flimsy versions that break and are thrown away within the year. There's a quieter benefit, too. When you own just a few things you genuinely like, you tend to stop wanting more of them. The craving to keep buying fades, not because you're denying yourself anything, but because you already have what you need, and it happens to be good. I would far rather have 3 things I truly love than 30 I only tolerate. And caring for the few things you own becomes a small pleasure of its own. Oiling a wooden board, resoling a good pair of shoes, keeping that one knife sharp. There's a quiet satisfaction in tending what you have, and it keeps you from ever really needing the new. Now, the single biggest everyday saving isn't dramatic in the least. It's simply that people cook and eat at home. A meal made in your own kitchen costs a small fraction of one bought outside. And here, that's just the ordinary way a day is fed. Even lunch travels from home. The bento box, a small packed lunch, arranged neatly in its little compartments, is an everyday sight, carried to school and to the office alike. It isn't seen as a sacrifice or a sad little desk lunch. It's just food from home, made the night before or that same morning. Cooking for yourself most days, rather than paying someone else to do it, is quietly the most powerful money habit on this entire list. And it feeds you better, besides. It's one of those rare things that saves a great deal of money and improves the day at the very same time. My grandmother could feed a whole family beautifully on almost nothing, and none of us ever felt we were going without. There's a rhythm to it, too, that saves without ever trying. A pot of something simmered today that stretches easily into tomorrow. The last of the week's vegetables turned into a soup. The rice from the morning quietly becoming lunch. Nothing is wasted, and very little needs to be bought. There's also a habit, still, of using actual cash and of keeping it in its proper places. Many households set money aside in labeled envelopes. This much for food, this much for the small things of the month. And when an envelope is empty, that is simply the end of it until the next month comes. It sounds old fashioned, and it is. But handing over real notes and watching them leave your hand is felt in a way that tapping a card silently never is. The money is visible. It runs low and then out, right where you can see it happen. There's no vague bottomless stream, only this envelope and whatever is left in it. That gentle physical limit quietly does the work of willpower for you without any strain at all. You don't have to resist temptation very often when the spending was already settled, calmly and kindly, at the start of the month. When something does wear out or break, the first thought here isn't always to replace it. Very often, it's to mend it. There's a long, deep tradition of repair, of patching, of darning, of coaxing a little more life out of a thing. There's even a well-known art to it. Kintsugi is the old practice of mending broken pottery with lacquer and gold so that the repair becomes part of the bowl's beauty, rather than a flaw to be hidden away. It says something about the whole attitude that a mended thing can be more precious than a new one, not less. On an ordinary, everyday level, it simply means a torn strap is stitched, a wobbly chair is steadied, and a simple wrapping cloth called a furoshiki is folded and used again and again in place of a bag thrown away each time. None of this comes from being unable to afford something new. It comes from not needing to, and from a quiet pleasure in keeping a good thing going. Part of what makes all of this easy is the home itself, which tends to be modest. Space here is precious, and homes are often small, and that smallness quietly saves money in a dozen ways at once. A smaller home costs less to rent or to buy, less to warm in winter and cool in summer, and this is the part people miss, far less to fill. A big house seems to demand more furniture, more things, more stuff to spread across all those empty rooms. A small one simply cannot hold much, and so you never buy much, and you never miss what there was never room for. Rooms here often do more than one job too, the same space for eating by day and sleeping by night, so you need less of everything to begin with. Living a little smaller turns out to be one of the simplest ways of living a great deal cheaper, without it ever feeling like a loss. There's also far less shame here in a thing being secondhand or passed along. Children's clothes and books move from family to family. Good things are handed down, given away, or found again in the many secondhand shops, rather than always bought new. Something barely used, at a fraction of the price, with all its life still ahead of it. There's no embarrassment in that here, only a small satisfaction. And things flow the other way just as easily. When you're finished with something good, you don't throw it out. You pass it to someone who can use it, or you sell it on. Objects have longer lives this way, moving quietly from hand to hand, and a great deal less money is spent buying brand new what someone nearby was only trying to let go of. It's a gentler and much cheaper way for things to circulate. And here is the part that makes the whole of it possible. A great deal of what people most enjoy here costs nothing at all. The very best pleasures are so often free. In spring, whole families sit out under the cherry blossom for a long afternoon with a simple packed lunch, and that is the entire outing. That is the treat. There are summer festivals in the streets, a walk to watch the autumn leaves turn red, the first hot bath on a truly cold night. Not one of these needs a wallet. When your happiness is built mostly from small, free, ordinary things, the seasons turning, a good meal, the people close around you, you simply need to buy far less to feel that your life is already full. That, more than any clever budgeting trick, is the real secret to spending less. You aren't going without anything. You already have more than enough. Some of my happiest memories from childhood cost my parents nothing at all. A blanket spread under the blossoms, a paper fan at a summer festival, the walk home together in the warm dark. I couldn't tell you a single expensive thing they ever bought me, but I remember those afternoons perfectly. Holding all of this together is a certain mindset, a quiet refusal to keep up with other people. There is markedly less pressure here to display wealth, to own the newest thing, to let the neighbors see just how well one is doing. So much spending, everywhere in the world, isn't truly about the thing at all. It's about being seen to have it. And when that particular pressure eases, when a modest home and an old but well kept coat carry no shame whatsoever, an enormous amount of spending simply falls away and is genuinely never missed. Contentment, it turns out, is remarkably cheap. It is comparison that is so terribly expensive. Quietly letting go of the need to keep pace with anyone else may be the single most freeing money habit there is. And, like most of these, it isn't really about money at all. There's a kind of freedom in it that's hard to describe until you've felt it. When you stop running a race that nobody actually set for you, a real weight seems to lift, and almost as an afterthought, the spending quietly falls away with it. There's one more, and it's about how the children are raised into all of this. Money isn't a hidden or shameful subject here. Little ones are given a small allowance and gently expected to save a part of it. At New Year, they receive a toshidama, a little money in a decorated envelope from the family, and are quietly taught to put some of it away rather than spend it all at once. Growing up watching a parent keep the Kakeibo at the table, carrying a packed lunch, mending rather than replacing, children simply absorb it, long before anyone sits them down to explain. By the time they're grown, none of it feels like effort or sacrifice. It's just the water they swam in. And that, in the end, is why these habits last a lifetime here. They were never rules imposed from outside. They were the ordinary shape of home, learned early, and carried gently forward. So there it is, and you'll have noticed that almost none of it, in the end, is truly about money. Writing down what you spend, hating to waste, buying few things, but good ones, cooking at home, using cash you can actually see, mending what breaks, living a little smaller, buying secondhand and passing things on, finding your pleasures in the free and ordinary, not keeping up with anyone, and teaching all of it, early and gently, to the young. Every one of these spends less almost as a side effect. What they are really about is wanting less and valuing what you already have. That's the quiet heart of the whole thing. A calmer relationship with money turns out, in truth, to be a calmer relationship with life itself. And, once more, this is not about Japan being wiser than anywhere else. Your own grandmother, wherever in the world she lived, very likely knew most of this by heart. These habits belong to everyone, and not one of them is ever too late to begin. You could start with just a single one, a little notebook tonight, or one meal cooked at home instead of ordered in, and let the rest follow slowly, in its own good time. If this slower way of living with money feels worth returning to, subscribe to the channel and keep walking with me through these quieter habits. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.